If you're a fellow classmate or looking for any more value-added conversation, now's a good time to turn it off.
I'm surprised the wolf even gave him the time of day to like put his brass knuckle things on or whatever the hell they were.
Medical industry is lucky to have you.
Dude, I think it's lucky to have all of us, man. I think that we're all, it seems like everyone in this group is so in tune.
So welcome back to A Couple of Fellas. We've got a first episode coming in from Austin. About time I got this set up going. Still no video. Sometimes we do video, but that adds a whole nother can of worms to the editing especially. And no green screen here. And we've got a friend, a fellow classmate, a Dell Medical School future doctor. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Well, it's awesome to be here. My name is Sam Burr. I guess a little bit about myself. I was born in Austin, went to UT in Austin, and am now at Dell Medical School in Austin. So a lot of time in Austin. While I've been in Austin, or at least leading up to medical school, following undergrad, and I'll just say that I had a little bit of a circuitous route to ultimately deciding that medicine was for me.
You love that word, the circuitous route.
And it's the perfect word to describe it.
Yeah, we love it.
And because I think it's tough. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to undergrad. I had a year where I thought I wanted to do maybe economics, and just didn't understand it at all, really. I mean, and maybe just didn't have the motivation there. I mean, the intrinsic interest probably wasn't there either. And which, side note, is definitely why I think a gap year before high school, or after high school, before college, is probably warranted. But ended up switching to sociology. Really clicked, really connected with that subject matter. Human behavior and the macro forces that kind of contribute to that are really fascinating to me. And thought that maybe social work would be the move. Worked at a residential treatment center called Austin Recovery.
Colostomy?
Austin Recovery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
sorry. Austin Recovery.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah, I can.
They said colostomy recovery. I'm like, that's a specific type of care.
But no, yeah. So we were helping to treat people who have substance use disorders, and it was really meaningful work. I was a client engagement specialist there, so my role was basically just kind of get to know and have fun with the clients, all that good stuff. Which is really meaningful and emotional at times. And then later on, got connected with the Micah 6 Food Pantry. Worked there for a while. I was the director there for a little bit, and it was also a really kind of meaningful experience with a lot of overlap with Austin Recovery, because a lot of our clients there were people who had limited access to treatment options, despite having ongoing problems with substance use and all that good stuff. Or all that bad stuff, I guess I should say. And ultimately found my way to Dell, and am very excited to be here with Zane. I mean, I guess that was a very long-winded kind of tell me about yourself, but that's the spiel.
No, we've got all the time in the world, and it's good. All of our listeners are maybe a dozen or so friends of mine. It's nice for them to know who's replacing them in my life.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully I am a worthy replacement.
Oh yeah, compared to those fools, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely a sterling individual, excellent representative of the class of Dell Med 2025. Proud to know you already, and also a genuinely good dude. Thank you so far for showing me around Austin, swimming holes and places to go, things to see, bike rides to take, and helping me move in. Dude, I owe you so much for that. I think I've already given you one shout out on the last episode I recorded with Steve remotely, but nice. Thank you yet again.
You got it, man. It's funny. It was definitely a transitionary week. I mean, I'd been doing my own moving. I'd helped my roommate move or whatever. So it was just kind of a matter of keeping it going, man.
In the gear, in the mode.
Right. It's a workout. I mean, it's good.
It really is. And please tell me, that week was particularly hot and humid, at least for June, or is that representative? Because I burned through 2 shirts in 2 hours.
Yeah, I would say it's gonna be pretty representative.
Ooh.
It gets hot and humid down here. I mean, there's just like no way around that. And it's cool at first. I mean, I always enjoyed it first because you can go out and have fun, go swimming, all that good stuff. But there is a point in time where there's kind of a psychological component where, like, even when you're inside and you've got the AC on, it's like you can kind of feel the ambient heat in a way.
I keep my blinds closed most of the time.
Yeah.
They're open right now just so it's a little bit less dungeon-like in here, but
right. It's tough. And then all this, and you definitely get, like, I think probably 2 weeks to a month of like phenomenal weather in between summer and winter. And then it gets, I mean, I wouldn't say it gets objectively really cold here, but like the contrast makes it feel like you're in Siberia.
yeah. I was hearing yesterday from Allison, hopefully a future guest, another one of our classmates.
Absolutely.
Another, at least recently, Austinite.
Yes.
That your winters hover somewhere in like the 30s for the most part.
Yes.
Just above freezing. That's not too terrible, but I guess compared to 90, 90, 90 for months straight, yeah.
For sure. It's a big change. And I will say, I mean, she's absolutely right. And this year we kind of had, like, we had an anomalous year. I mean, in a lot of ways, obviously, but here in Austin, and I think throughout a lot of Texas, there was a ridiculous winter storm.
Yeah, that got national coverage. I was hearing about that up in New England, but yeah, give us some of the insider perspective.
It was rough, dude. I would just say that it was rough. Okay, so when it first started, no one really, I don't think was ready or like knew what was about to go down. I mean, we knew it was going to snow. We knew it was going to get really cold.
Weatherman got that much right.
But like, there wasn't a whole lot of like, okay, like the infrastructure of Austin like might shut down because of this. Like there was no, at least I didn't have that level of foresight. You know what I mean? I think everyone had full confidence.
Who would?
Yeah,
honestly,
I mean, in the grid and in all that good stuff. And so everyone was just like, oh yeah, it's going to get cold. We'll just bundle up, stay inside, watch movies, whatever. The roads are probably going to get snowed on. So it'll probably be a week, you know, where no one really has to go to work or whatever. So people, there was a lot of silver lining around the impending event.
Reminds me of the start of the pandemic. Like 2 weeks, work from home. This is going to be a vacation.
Exactly. Like everyone's like, okay, like this is not too bad. You know, just not a whole lot of mental preparation. But the reality was that like very quickly the Austin power grid was like overstrained, and like there's all kinds of like, I mean, hindsight on the Austin power grid. I mean, like I learned about it for the first time after the fact, which is basically that like we have our own grid and we don't really rely on other states or share power or whatever. And I guess it's cheaper for us to do that. Very
Texas of you.
For sure. I don't know all the details, but like after experiencing that week, it's like, I don't think, you know, maybe it's not justified, but yeah. So basically rolling blackouts started, and I'm using air quotes with the rolling blackouts because in reality they were funneling power to the parts of the grid. So it's kind of like it's split up into segments around Austin. So like if you're on the same grid within Austin as a hospital, then you probably got power. If you're in the same grid as like a fire station, you probably got power for the majority of that week. But if you weren't, and this was my experience, and I don't know if this is like the actual what was really going down, but this kind of was what I was picking up on. But like my friend and I were living out in Parma, which is North Austin. We are not next to a hospital. I mean, I guess we're somewhat close to one, but like not close enough apparently, or like a fire station. And we lost power for like 4 days. And like if it's below freezing outside and you don't have power, like morale tanks pretty quickly. I mean, like it gets cold in that house, you know, you're bundled up, and you know, thank God we had like a gas grill that we were cooking food on like outside, and we would make these kind of group meals, which would like restore morale. You would charge your stuff in your car. I mean, until your car ran out of gas, and then you're just
no
kind
gas,
of electronically, just like starved. You know, you go to bed when the sun goes down, which was pretty early because it was winter. We had a bunch of candles going. They were all scented.
Very nice.
You know, so what creates kind of a bizarre scent profile. But yeah, I think by the time and our pipes burst, so we didn't have water. And so by the time we got to like day 3, none of us had really showered. We were having to do this thing with the toilet where we were pouring water. We were boiling snow and putting water into the back of the toilet, and that's how we were flushing. So even going to the bathroom was like this total chore. And by day 3 or 4, like we were trying to figure out like how can we get out of here and like stay with someone who has power, and how do we even get over to them? I mean, some people had like 4-wheel drive trucks that could like handle the ice, but none of us had a car that was like built for it. I mean, the whole thing, I'm just like, hopefully in painting a picture, it was just like, it was, I mean,
Boots on the ground. It sounds pretty terrible.
yeah, it was definitely lame. I mean, and, fixing the pipes, like, I mean, some people who did have power because, and I don't really know all of the, the economics of how the utility bills charge or whatever, but some people were looking at like thousands of dollars of like utility bills for that 1 month because of that 1 week, because of, I guess, how they allocate power and like how they decide to value power based on like where everyone's pulling from it. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was a total like, what are we doing here? Like, we were totally unprepared for this. Like, this is ridiculous. We need to examine this. And of course, there were a bunch of scapegoats like green energy, like, failed us or whatever. I don't know, but like, it got politicized pretty quick. The whole thing was a little bit ridiculous, but
Yeah, sounds like that could definitely be the way that it goes, especially given kind of the political climate of the last couple years. Polarization seems to be the default, especially when there's blame to be had.
Exactly. I definitely think that we exist in somewhat of a, especially on social media, kind of a rage machine where that's profitable. I mean, people engage the most, I think, when they're angry and frustrated and
And that's where the algorithms drive
want to
it.
respond. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know.
You think Austin and Texas are making the appropriate preventative moves to stop this from happening again?
Honestly, if Abbott stays in office, which, I mean, I think Texas at this point is a little bit more purple than red. So who knows? And I think Matthew McConaughey is running for governor, which is
that
exciting.
confirmed? It sounds
Don't
likely.
quote me, but I'm like, I've heard a lot about it. And I think that he is, gearing up for it, which, that'll be very interesting to see how that works.
That's power of popularity. I bet he would take it.
Yeah. I mean, also kind of interesting to see where he'll land on, the political spectrum, with regard to certain politics that Texas definitely is pretty hardcore about. But I think if it's Abbott, then I don't think that we're going to be making a whole lot of meaningful changes with regard to the grid. I mean, I don't think that we're going to start sharing power. They might clean house with ERCOT, or at least try to restructure, because I guess ERCOT is like the governing body
that manages the whole Texas grid.
So
I've heard bad things about ERCOT.
Yeah, so have I. I've definitely heard that like they're not super plugged in to what's really happening in Texas. I think some of them don't even live in Texas who are on the board.
It's just rich executives out of state or whatever.
Tale as
old as time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed that turns around.
Yes.
If not, I think that there's a fire station adjacent to my building. You're welcome here.
Right on.
Should it happen
That's
again?
What's up. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's like a climate change thing. I mean, maybe it was a fluke. I don't know. I mean, but it was wild. I don't think it's gotten that cold here since. I mean, I think maybe they had something similar in the 80s. But yeah.
Whew. Once in a generation type storm.
For sure.
Glad I moved here afterwards.
Yes. Absolutely. I think that we've paid our dues, and we hopefully should be okay.
Taken some lumps, hopefully learned some lessons. Hopefully
Yes.
some positive community type support came out of it, people banding together.
That really did happen. I mean, like at the time I was working at the food pantry and I couldn't make it down there. And so we had to cancel some distributions that week. But the Austin Police Department really stepped up, like in conjunction with the University of Texas at Austin. And we worked it out so that police officers could go down to the pantry because they were close and they were like, they were down there to get food from the pantry and, deliver it to the Ronald McDonald House and to one of the UT food courts to get food to, particularly the students who were there who were running out of food.
Oh yeah, geez.
So
There's so many things to consider with that type of
for sure.
catastrophe.
Yeah, it was really great, and it raised morale, and so that was really phenomenal. That like a lot of people truly did step up to like make that happen, and Austin Mutual Aid really. We're working around the clock to get people to shelters, to get them safe, and so when I came back to the pantry the following week and was talking to the clients, it seemed like the general, experience during that time was that most, at least who were there, were like, yeah, I had a warm place to stay, which was awesome.
Thank goodness for that.
Definitely.
And for all the people putting in the work.
Yes.
Kudos to you also for your work at the Recovery Center and the food pantry and all of those incredibly humanitarian efforts.
For sure. Yeah. They were just a lot of fun to work at, and, everyone there is really wonderful. So, nice. I think you're a product of the people that you associate with at the end of the day. And so I definitely credit like a lot of the changes that I've had to make in my life with just being around the right people who have the right intentions.
Amen to that. And to that point, man, how privileged I feel to be a part of this class of Dell.
I know.
I am so impressed at the cohort that's been put together.
It is wild.
Imposter syndrome from day one, but we'll get through it together. And
for sure,
man, the together vibe is so strong and so counter to what I have heard about the medical school experience.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's like, I think what's so phenomenal is we're in this class where I think everyone was experiencing on some level, some degree of anxiety about whether they were going to be like good enough or worthy of being in this cohort. And because there's that shared experience and everyone's already been so open and vulnerable about that, it creates this learning environment and social environment where, I truly at this point feel really comfortable with, and I'm sure I will make plenty mistakes. And, academically, but also socially. I'm sure that like there will be instances where I say the wrong thing or, accidentally am, insensitive about something or just not educated enough. And I think that, an orientation's done a great week of facilitating this kind of space, but it's like, I think at this point we can all really trust one another to like really help foster like, instead of shaming, and making someone feel guilty about making those mistakes and like just sort of coming down them with heavy hands. It's just like, oh no, that's an opportunity to learn, man. That's great that you've actually had that experience.
Seriously. And another huge shout out to the facilitators and planners of orientation, because all of those sessions felt incredibly helpful. I did not expect to feel supported or comfortable with failure to this degree. This is, I would say, if not unique, at least rare for medical school and also in general.
Oh yeah.
Like it's something to be proud of for sure. And man, am I looking forward to it, which is good because we have quite a lineup of things to do. We're starting to work through the pre-reading for day one of this like 355 day first year. And my goodness, it's, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 hours of reading and pre-assignments.
It's definitely a lot. It's like, and that's what they tell you, right? But it's like, you don't, like, I was always kind of curious. I was like, like there were instances where I was like, I felt slammed in undergrad. So I was like, dude, if medical school is like way worse than like, like I was like, I don't know if like it's gonna, like if I'm gonna make it happen, and, but they do, I think, like, despite the fact that like it like no matter how you slice it, it's definitely a fire hydrant blowing in your, in your face. And it's like, you can't really drink all that water. But cause like, just like for some perspective, like frame of reference, or I guess perspective is maybe the right word here. We're doing like 4 hours of lecture, and each hour is basically like a field of study that sounds like getting basically a crash course in. So like starting off with statistics, then moving into, and there's, they're related. So that makes it kind of nice. And it, allows for connections to be made, which is great for learning, but statistics and then epidemiology and then, clinical trials. and experimental and observational studies, and then moving into like radiology, and but it's it's a lot of stuff to cover for one morning.
It looks a lot like each of those hours is going to summarize half a semester of an undergrad course.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Which is daunting when you cut it that way.
Yes. And because that was the kind of realization I made. I was like, wow, these are big one-offs. And I don't think that they're going to, I don't think they're going to be one-offs, but it's like spend 1 hour on like, that's a pretty broad topic.
I don't expect to do a lot of remediation in the classes themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Yeah, it's like get yourself caught up and then show up and like, we'll talk business. But yeah, I do think though that like they do a great job of like, here's how you study. Here's like what a week looks like.
Some suggested schedules, all the tools and resources.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that with online med-ed and Anki and the large group interactives and all these different sessions, it's 200% of what we need.
Right.
And that they're doing it more to make all of these resources available to suit all learning types and how we approach it.
Totally.
Rather than it being, you should know all of the things from all of these resources.
Exactly. Yeah. It's basically, it's like an apple tree. It's like take the apples that look crisp to you, man, and like and make it work.
I like that analogy.
But yes.
Hitting home with food. I think I've already, in our 20 hours of exposure with one another, established a pretty clear identity for myself as the guy that eats a lot.
Absolutely. I should think so. But I mean, whenever I was, and it may not look like it's Zane, but there was a time when I was pretty dedicated to like lifting weights and all that good stuff. And the thing that I realized, and I'm sure I'm preaching the choir here, but it's like eating, I feel like was 90% of the battle. I mean, maybe I'm attributing too much to it, but it's just like, dude,
it's up there.
If you hit a plateau and you just like, and this is like was pretty reductionist, but it's like I'm hitting a plateau. I'm just going to add another chicken breast to the lineup in my sort of food day or whatever. I don't know. Like it would help. It's like that
if the goal is to build muscle, put more macros in.
For sure.
That's definitely Carter's strategy right now. He's posting Snapchat stories of like buying 6 tubs of Greek yogurt and 8 gallons of milk for the protein.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it's definitely, it's like, I did find it to be like, it's very, and maybe just my whole strategy around it wasn't super streamlined, but it's a time consuming thing, I think, to like really maintain like your level of fitness, for example. Like
I hope I'm maintaining. It feels like there might be a slight decline, but the goal is to pick that up through school, which might be a big challenge, but at least we've got like an incredible university gym available. There's showers in the lecture building. That's great.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. If you go down the stairs from the lecture hall, the auditorium, there are 2 all-gender bathrooms, and there's a shower in each of them.
That is what's up.
Yup. That'll save it for the bike ride. You can rinse off.
I was thinking about the bike ride. I was like, yeah, there's going to be some sweaty days.
Speaking of which, last night we went to Barton Springs, which super cool. I haven't been to a place like that maybe ever, but this was like a, I don't know, 1/4 mile long, 80-foot wide, natural spring-fed swimming pool with a diving board and lifeguards, and it was awesome. And you biked all the way there, what, like 4 miles each way, 5 miles?
Well, I will say, I mean, it's a good ride, but like, it's just so scenic. I mean, like the whole time you're riding, you're just looking around and you're just like, wow, like this is really beautiful. And there's definitely parts of Austin that you can't really hit if you're in a car. But if you're on your bike, it's different. Like you're kind of like, you're in, like if the cars, like if the roads are like, the arteries or whatever, then like the bike trails are like the arterioles, or just like the smaller capillaries that like really perforate into Austin. You know what I mean? And that was what I very recently realized when I've been starting to bike down there is like, you can hit some spots, man. And that's why I really want you to come on the bike ride with me.
Absolutely. Mine's pumped up right out there, making sure the tires hold air because they were flat when I got here. But I bought a bike lock, bought a bike rack. We can pick up and go anywhere we need to start there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dude, that would be, because it makes you forget about like, really kind of, I guess, putting in that bike ride work, to like get where you want to go. Like if you're riding through something that's like just gorgeous, then it's like this, I'm fine with being, kind of burnt out at the end of it. I mean, like it's, it's
a recharge.
it's definitely worth it.
So You had to get through, based on where we-ish live in the same general vicinity, down to Barton Springs, which is south of Austin and south of the river?
Right.
Okay. So is the first half of that ride through cities, or are you hitting like neighborhoods and still gorgeous areas? Do cities count as gorgeous to you?
I would say, yeah, the concrete jungle, man. I would say that the first quarter of the ride is pretty industrial, and you're right, it's totally subjective. But for me, I mean, it's not like I'm really paying a whole lot of attention to the scenery. But
More on the stoplights and cars?
you basically want to you cut through West Campus, which is kind of like where a lot of the undergraduate students live, and then you get to Lamar. And once you're on Lamar, you have access to the beginning of this like bike trail, which kind of tracks Lamar. It's like maybe it's somewhat parallel with some, crossovers happening here and there, but it basically takes you, behind particular like restaurants that are on Lamar or like on
Ooh.
Shoal Creek. You can hear music. There's a body of water or a creek that's flowing right next to the trail. You pass through a bunch of bridges, and then you kind of come up into the part of Austin where the Austin Public Library is. And that's like a really kind of beautiful spot. A lot of people walking around, a lot of cuisine. I haven't really checked a whole lot of it out, but it's cool.
I hear the library is a Harry Potter building.
It's very Harry Potter-esque, very Hogwarts. I mean, all they need is for the staircases to move around. And
Love that style of big old architecture.
Yeah. I mean, it's super cool. So I think like I did most of my like MCAT studying in that building just because it was a great.
Bring me back to stressful days.
For sure.
I don't know how many
I don't mean
practice
to bring a trauma.
how many practice exams I was working on until 2:30, 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But it wasn't maybe the healthiest way of going about it.
For sure. Well, everyone's got their strategy, and you made it happen, man. And that's what matters.
That's, as a quick side note off of the bike trail that you're leading us down, man, thank goodness. It feels like everything that was a struggle, all the extra classes, all of the MCAT stuff, all the resume extracurricular padding for the sake of their own activities and for the padding, everything is behind us. It feels like, if to do a video game analogy, it feels like we hit a massive checkpoint, like an autosave.
Right.
Not that we're starting fresh or leaving any of that behind us, but I don't know, whole different mindset, whole different set of priorities, whole different set of goals. The get to med school drive has been, I don't know, such an overriding theme for years. And that chapter can be closed.
We crossed that finish line. I mean, it's wild. I mean, I'm sure that there's some takes out there which are like, once you're there, that's when the real work starts or whatever. But dude, I mean, you bust your ass in pre-med stuff. I mean, like, and it's a different social environment, probably not as supportive.
Definitely
honestly.
not as supportive as Dell.
And it's I mean, it is a pressure cooker. And I'm sure it's going to be somewhat like that. I mean, we haven't really gotten into, the clinical rotation, stuff like that, where, maybe like the real medicine culture kind of rears its head or whatever. And the pressure is really on, but yeah, I mean, I would say it is in stark contrast to what we've experienced at Dell Medical School for sure.
I've heard a whole range of opinions from current and past medical students, but from the people that I most closely identify with, personality-wise, attitude, energy-wise, I've heard that the medical school grind, while intensive and extensive, is not as negative. You're learning things that you're going to apply. You're not taking, required courses that are tangentially related or only are for the MCAT benefit.
Totally.
Once you're in it, it's better than the ride up to it. And that's what I'm leaning into.
Exactly. It's more aligned with your interests. I mean, you're not having to go, like you said, to, some required class that's maybe specific to your major but where the professor knows that like there's a lot of kids who take his class or her class or their class because they're in pre-med and it's kind of part of the deal. And the professor then, who potentially has a jaded, perspective on pre-med students, like makes it this kind of like hurdle that like where it's unnecessarily kind of like competitive and hard. I mean, there's just like a lot of factors that really go into like it's a mental health kind of crucible for sure.
That's a great way to put it.
You have to like really dial it in and like figure out, your support systems to make it happen and utilize all your resources. But it's hard, man. And at med school, it's like, this is like, you finally are getting to the place where it's like, this is the stuff I actually wanted to learn in the first place.
Yep. However many years ago, for all of us kind of all over the map.
Yeah.
Like, when I made the call that this is the path I'm going to follow.
Right.
I think for any of us, just by virtue of the application process taking a whole freaking year,
yeah,
I think it's safe to say that it's been years since when we made the decision that we want to do medicine to when we actually get to start learning medicine.
Where it manifests.
And just keeping that goal in mind alone is like sometimes a grind in itself.
It definitely is. Yeah. But that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It is very, very nice to finally be there. And I think that you're right. I mean, I think it'll definitely be hard, but I don't know, as far as stress. And you also got to think too, like, I think a lot of people at this point, hopefully have developed pretty ironclad stress coping mechanisms and know that they can reach out and ask for help.
That's the hugest thing. Being at a school, I mean, to contrast it with, I know a lot of our students also applied, interviewed, got into Baylor right down the road.
Yeah.
And Texas Relativity down the road.
For sure.
It's like a complete classic med school environment where everyone is kind of cutthroat against one another. If you start to sink, people will push you down.
Right.
It's, I can't imagine that after the orientation that we had.
For sure.
I can't imagine a better way to learn medicine than arm in arm with your fellow students.
Yeah, make it a collective action problem. I mean, make the learning the superordinate cause that everyone bands together and rallies behind. Like, why not? I mean, I don't know. It's just like, because you want everyone to be collaborative when they finally get to the practice of medicine.
We're not trying to be ivory tower doctors. And that seems to be too big a problem, right? You don't want to be the guy that's, especially when, health and livelihood are at stake, that I know best and you don't know shit. That's not a healthy way to do it.
At all. I mean, and it's like those ego trips, man, it's like they're pretty alienating and like
counterproductive.
You can go down that rabbit hole where you feel like you have this identity where it's like, oh no, like I have to outperform, the people that are around me to really feel like connected to who I am. It's like, dude, that's this overblown ego that's driving you and alienating you, and it gets harder and harder to keep that up. And because just frankly, like, there are like amazing people out there that are always going to challenge you, and there's always like, I mean, I'm definitely a believer in the fact it's like there's always someone smarter, like more badass than you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like, it is what it is, and it's like great. It's like I have someone that I can like learn from or like aspire to be like.
If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
For sure. Yeah. And it's just, there was a time in my life where like I was like, I needed to be seen in a certain way, and like to not get that externally from people was like, you'll go bizarre distances to establish that for yourself, and in the end it hardly ever works. You know what I mean? Like it hardly ever like manifests into the situation where people are like, okay, yeah, Sam has convinced me that like
he's convinced me.
He's a total like G and just like has it all.
Yeah, that hashtag relatable. That's, I've found that it has been, at least for my experience in life, significantly more conducive to growth and self-improvement.
Yeah.
To be open to not being the smartest person, to admit those failures, to search for help. I mean, there's no better way to learn than to be honest about what you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like, on some level, I think it is kind of the path of least resistance. Like,
right? It's at least psychologically sheltering yourself.
Right.
You need to be able to face the hard truths and the things you don't know. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that that's already been established as normative within our kind of student.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah.
Let's switch gears up just a tiny bit.
Absolutely. Down.
In Austin, I got plenty of ideas and questions for you, man, especially being maybe the truest Austinite of our class. Like, you are a lifelong Austinite, at least so far.
Okay, yeah.
what is like the standout thing that you are most excited about in Austin, especially to have new people who haven't been to Austin, who don't know the city? Like, what
Mm,
things are you most excited to share about this place where we now all live and work?
gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I think it really comes down to, I mean, I've always been like a big kind of, I think, nature guy here in Austin, where like I love the green belt. And I love, places where you can kind of like be physical, but also have this space where you can talk about kind of the deep stuff and like how you're feeling and like life and where you're at. And I think that there's something about being like on the green belt, which is this like it's a trail system that kind of runs through Austin, and it's somewhat connected to the hike and bike trail. That like you can walk along creeks. There's a whole bunch of like uncharted territory back there. I mean, there's definitely some trail systems, but like you can get lost. It's big and it's beautiful.
Effectively still in the city?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's incredible. And but yeah, I think like that has always been a place where like you can go and like when you're in that kind of environment where it's like it's nature, you can't help but to kind of zoom out because you're surrounded by things that are truly present and who aren't so like worried about like what's gonna happen. Like it's like it's trees and animals, and like it's like sort of instinctual stuff and like
You're not thinking about textbook PDFs at that moment.
yeah, you don't get reminded of like the kind of rat race when you're out there because like you don't have like a tree doesn't trigger my schema for like uh having a plan for some meeting or lecture or whatever. Like it's just you just notice that like it's beautiful and like it triggers your schema for beauty. Yeah, exactly. So
Absolutely.
I'm very excited to like show people around that place because like not only can we all discover more places together, but I mean I'd love to show you spots that like are really epic.
Dude, absolutely.
So,
right up my alley.
yeah.
That's one of the few downsides. There's a couple that I've identified, more than one. Sorry if I'm getting redundant, but
No, not at all.
I love the cold and I love snow and I
Yeah.
love snow sports. So
Right.
missing that will be a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
Missing the coast and the ocean. I've kind of always lived within an hour of the sea. So
Yeah.
that'll be a bit of an adaptation as well. But at least we have all these lakes and rivers and aquifers and
Yeah.
everything of that nature.
Absolutely.
And mountains too. That's going to be one that I miss. Like I love the elevation of a
sure.
hike because the
Yeah.
meditative aspect is great, but burning out your muscles is also great.
Definitely. Yeah.
And family. Family's not local.
I,
but
exactly. Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. I mean, I would say that. I mean, it's always kind of a tough transition. We're definitely kind of a hilly city as opposed to sort of a mountainous kind of situation down here.
I'm pleasantly surprised with the number of hills. I was told that Texas is
Yeah.
all flat, and like at least there are dips in the
hills.
terrain.
Yeah, exactly. And you are quickly reminded that when you're on bike rides and stuff. But actually, that does bring up. So I kind of want to know like more about. So I read your profile on the. So like Dell released this like introduction to some like a handful of students, one of which was Zane.
They just wanted to highlight their one out of stater.
I mean, I think that like they were like, who are the badasses in this group, and like let's show them up. And and I mean, I think we're all really awesome, but you guys are all like have super unique backgrounds, which I think is really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I want to know more about like your EMT experience, and like I know that you went to, was it Zambia?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that in an EMT capacity or was that like
pre-EMT?
Okay.
Yeah, that was I don't know, something I kind of always wanted to do with the medical side volunteering of things.
Yeah.
And engaged in church youth group activities throughout my youth, but that was a lot of like more food pantry related,
Sure.
some park cleanup type things with park rangers, which is great and important service, but definitely the itch to start applying the medical skill set, such as it was at that time, was hugely there. And my junior spring of undergrad, I managed to pull enough strings together and take courses ahead of time that I could go abroad, which was like a huge goal for me for undergrad.
Totally.
And I figured while I was already across the Atlantic, it would be a good time to chain together a trip. So after 5 months in Sweden, I flew down to Zambia and got involved with the exact clinic name I'm currently blanking. It was just called the police clinic locally.
Okay.
It was nearby the police station and kind of a public clinic that just served the surrounding neighborhoods.
Gotcha.
And hugely formative experience, man.
I'm sure.
I was, you know, a pre-med and I'd volunteered in hospitals, but certainly I didn't have the EMT certification. I don't have any of the clinical skills that I've since been able to develop or will continue to develop at Dell.
Right.
And still it was like I was vaccinating kids and dispersing prescriptions, and the amount of trust and warmth that people showed was unbelievable. And the disparity between the medical care that I had experienced. My dad was in the Navy, so up until, you know, now I've had military health care, which is a hassle, but is thorough.
It's great.
So when sick, when I broke a finger in childhood, always right to the emergency room, always got seen same day. I would say a very privileged experience with healthcare. And because of that, a very biased perspective on the type of care that's available for people. We've always lived in like lower middle class areas where there are hospitals and there are clinics and you can see a doctor when-ish you need to.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, at this clinic, there was one clinician who had completed 18 months of the 2 years of clinical training in, I think it was Namibia next door, because they had to quote him, a less stringent process for getting accepted. And he did 3/4 of the training and was now the head clinician at this clinic.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, at the risk of misspeaking or sounding insensitive, the disparity was jaw-dropping. He had a single rubber glove in his desk that he would put on to do examinations and then pull it off, put it in the drawer, and pull it on again for the next patient. Which, when he's examining an infant who has worms and poking around in her mouth to see if she's got SC something, whatever. I'm blanking on it, but yeah, to see what she has wrong with her, and then the next patient has weeping sores on his legs, and the guy is prodding with the same glove, is just a disconnect. To my shame, I did not realize that was the reality for, honestly, a huge population portion of the globe.
Totally.
And yeah, man, it was just really eye-opening to see what those differences were. And my mom was there for the first week of the month that I was volunteering. She's an ultrasound tech, so she's got some familiarity with medical care and wanted to volunteer as well.
Right.
And yeah, like she was sobbing every night after we were at the clinic, and put together a big box of things that they needed, a new scale, a new, boxes of gloves, just ibuprofen, and shipped it over, and it never arrived because there's corruption and the politicians just like rival gangs effectively can just raid the mail and take things. So like the supplies that we tried to send didn't get there. Just so many things were heartbreaking in that regard. And I still keep in touch with one of the nurses at the clinic that I worked with, and the foreman who was working on a community school construction project. I went there to help in the afternoons, and like, man, just the kindness and the work ethic of these freaking heroes was, I don't know, it colored a lot. Talking about some of the older ways of thinking and just the very me-centric approach that I had even to my path in medicine was honestly shameful to reflect on. And it definitely changed a lot of my motivation and goals. And it's something that especially that particular clinic, I would love to return to with just a broader skill set, the ability to diagnose, to recommend treatments, to try and give better care than I was able to. It was really frustrating to be so unequipped to help. Yeah. And then with the EMTing in Boston, there are a lot of neighborhoods in and around it being a major metropolitan area that are effectively like healthcare deserts. There's just no insurance, no access to healthcare, no reliable transportation. Right. There was a patient that we picked up because she had to call an ambulance. She had damaged her knee, and I don't know exactly what the injury was, but clearly swollen, clearly in pain, and she was on crutches and had no one who could bring her to the hospital. She had to crutch 1.5 miles to a bus stop to get to the hospital, where
Jeez.
they refused care because she had no insurance. And then her knee was too inflamed to walk back to a bus stop. So we picked her up in the ambulance and brought her home.
That's astonishing.
And in my backyard, like to see how not close to the Zambian conditions, but how different it was to the healthcare systems that I'd experienced personally and professionally was, again, like a huge revelation, culture shock. Yeah, not dealing with, but, caring for and transporting psychiatric patients to and from group homes and seeing what support systems and medical care is available was, it's in Boston too. So it's 1.5 miles away from some of the literal best healthcare in the world.
Right.
Mass General Hospital's 0.8 miles away, and there are people who physicians won't see.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, man. It exposed a lot of serious flaws and definitely motivated me to try and make a change outside of practicing good medicine, but really trying to take Dell's mission to heart and kind of innovate the healthcare system as a whole.
Oh yeah. It definitely is, I think, a situation where, I mean, the care inequities are like unbelievably exacerbated. And I think that we're getting to this point where there's got to be some level of realization. I mean, like, just like that doctor who spoke to us about growth on one of the orientations days said, he was like, look, there are like basically 3 specialties that like make money for a hospital, and if you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's like, so you're then relying on those 3 modes of patient care to like at least not be operating in like a complete deficit, every year at a hospital. And it really makes it seem like a no-brainer for there to, I mean, especially if you have instances where it's just like, okay, like they won't even treat you if you don't have like health insurance. It's like, why do we not have more? I mean, I think it should totally be a single payer system so that there can be more like government subsidization of like treating people, because it's not, it's just not a system where like, like, I mean, if you want to look at it as a business, that is like sustainable, you know what I mean? I mean, especially if you have private parties basically acting as proxy doctors, determining what they'll even cover and what is like what the patient needs, like even after the physician's like, no, this is what the patient needs. Like, this is what I need you to cover.
Yeah. The fact that it's just brutal that there are entire companies and, careers set up to deny patients getting the healthcare that they need.
Right.
It's, I don't know, man. I think we can do better. And I think that we have a freaking responsibility to do better.
Exactly. I mean, we definitely have a fiduciary responsibility to really start making some changes. And I mean, and it's like, I mean, the logistics of that level of shift, I'm sure are like out of control. But it's like, what do you do when you're faced with something that like is already in place that like is destined to like collapse, it seems like at this point. And maybe that's like how change happens, is like you just end up running up against a brick wall and you're forced to change.
But man, does a proactive shift sound better than that?
Exactly. I mean, and I'm sure that there's lots of money and lobbying involved, and, insurance companies are, fight tooth and nail to keep, and they're people's jobs, who work in insurance. It's like, it's not like they're bad people at all, that's just their line of work.
Yeah. Talk about being jaded. I don't know what mindset it takes, but I guess you're just reducing people to numbers and trying to meet a quota.
Exactly. Yeah. It's tragic. And I wanted to speak a little bit to you at the point that you made when you were in Zambia, where, despite the, I mean, just like egregious, like corruption and like lack of resources, all of the things that were inhibiting like solid quality of care. I mean, for the people who were seeking care, the fact that like you were still met with this level of like, like they were all, it sounded like they were really happy to see you and like we're really grateful. I that's always something to me that like is so, it's such a like a touching concept to be in a situation where you're with someone who's like so vulnerable and you are in a position of like relative power, and they're like trusting you and like believing in you, and are willing to like, I mean, I don't know, like it's like on some level like there's so much trust and vulnerability and like giving yourself over to the care of someone else who you know maybe don't really know that well. um but it's like it's such a humbling thing to be on, you know, the care side of that relationship. I mean, and that manifests not only in medicine but like in a lot of different kinds of relationships that you might find in your own life. But it is viscerally human, and I think it really kind of brings you back to this place of like, I don't know, like just kind of,
Gratitude.
yeah, gratitude and community and love. I mean, it's special. So, I mean, I can only imagine what that experience must have like been like in the moment. I mean, I'm sure it was just like maybe made you want to cry, dude. I mean,
Yeah, it was heavy, and man, am I appreciative for the privilege of being able to go. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of disjointed to think about, but the cost of the flights to get to Zambia and back
yeah,
alone, applied to the healthcare system that I was working in Zambia, would have been a massive,
right,
boon. But yeah, so many barriers, from the mail system and generalized corruption to just the getting that to apply efficaciously and be spent in the right way.
right,
Yeah, man, there's a lot of work to do, and that's why I'm damn proud to be a part of the group that's going to be fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work.
yeah, for sure.
It's a lot, but yeah, just got to recognize the privilege that we have and
Yeah,
do our best to take the opportunities afforded us and put
try
it
to
to work
elevate
for the
that.
betterment of everyone.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I mean, and I just think like if you approach it all like care for another human being in a way that like really does include those like human components, of vulnerability and like sharing about yourself and like really like trying to figure out what exactly it is that they want in the moment, when they're seeking care, is like, I think it has the effect of, I mean, when people like, if someone like is wanting to build like a real relationship with me, and wants to get to know me more and like has like a genuine like interest in like who Sam is, um it it's so warm and fuzzy, and like, and that I think it has such a ripple effect, where, you know, if I'm like in a really stressful environment, I go to work and then I go to see the doctor because I had some sort of work related injury, getting paid hourly, you know, so I'm losing money. And I go and someone is like, I just kind of get written off or like not really taken seriously. My concerns aren't really heard. And like, I kind of feel like it's almost like for me, it would almost be like emasculating, you know? Um, you know, you like all that stuff, like everything has a ripple effect. And like that, you can go back, you know, to your own home. And, you know, in instances in the past where I've experienced, you know, being, you know, for lack of a better term, just like, you know, crapped on, you, I had the tendency of like doing that to the next person, you
Yeah,
know?
there's a pay it forward type mentality.
Exactly. And yeah, it's just like, I think it's really worth, I think, considering, you know, like, I think just the reverberation that like individual actions can have and like changing like almost like macro level like interactions. I think there's definitely a connection there.
Medical industry is lucky to have you.
Dude, I think it's lucky to have all of us, man. Well, I mean, I think that we're all, it seems like everyone in this group is so in tune, with these kinds of realities. And I've got to say, like, it's got to be such a difficult task of like, like, you know, you're reading
5,500 applications.
Yeah, this is like stuff on paper, right? And it's like a whole other thing to like really pick up on these qualities. Like I mean, the interview process for Dell is like definitely like a crucible, and like there's a lot that goes into it. But like even then, it's like I think that they've just done like a bizarrely amazing job at like finding a group of people who are all just like, I mean, truly care and are like truly self-aware, and I mean, and also have like been around the block.
Seriously, I'm amazed. I don't think I've heard a single, I mean, 50 is a small class, but I don't think I've heard a single overlap in background or experience professionally. I mean, even academically, there's a handful of neuroscience majors, but that's the most overlap there. We've got Marines, engineers, people that have been doing entomology research. It runs the gamut, and I am so stoked for that because the opportunities to learn from one another and complement what we're covering in a classroom or in the lecture material is just, it feels boundless.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's going to be a good year. It's going to be a good 4 years.
Yeah.
Frankly.
It's going to be amazing, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone does and having the true pass fail also. It feels like we can really cheer each other on. Like, there's enough residency spots that we can all end up with our first choice. Totally. We are able to, you know, I don't know, just like support and be excited for every win that a classmate has rather than looking at it like a finite pie that takes away from our opportunities.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting, man. I gotta say, I definitely have an interest in like wanting to do that, like, just as like a side note, sort of topic. I guess it's sort of a topic change, but I definitely, you know, you were talking about engaging in that like 2 days a week jujitsu. Like, I'm down to get serious about that,
dude. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The gym I want to go to is awesome.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
It seems super sick. And if we can get like a squad of people that do that, we'll have a squad that does the farmers market, a squad that does all of these different activities. Just overlaying those additional threads of connection aside from academic, I think is going to talk about ripple effects, improve everything. Our collaborative spirit, our friendship and support for one another, the mental health aspect.
Right.
It's and Austin seems like such an amazing place to just branch out and have a breadth of involvement.
It is, yeah. I mean, I mean, as far as extracurricular stuff, I definitely think that like that would be a great outlet. I mean, especially, I mean, I feel like we cover so many bases as far as like, you know, stress and like learning how to collaborate, learning how to be like, you know, learning how to compete, but in like a healthy way where like you are able to like. I don't know. Like, I think sometimes like I have this tendency to like be extremely non-competitive and like we'll just like let things go and like we'll never kind of push back or whatever. But I think in some instances, man, it's like, I mean, for me, like I would want someone to really push back against me or like challenge me in certain ways. I mean, because I think that's, you know, definitely like a growing process, and on some level, it's like I've definitely been in situations where like by being really non-competitive, I've done someone a disservice when they've really been trying to like get better at something or like, you know.
Talking about great analogies, jiu-jitsu is a perfect one for that. When you are, and this is something I tend to lean into too much, being generally heavier and larger than most of the people I roll with.
Sure.
If you're not putting effort back as your training partner is trying to work moves, then it doesn't work. You need the resistance because that's how these techniques were designed. And if you're flopping around or just acquiescing to their motion, then they aren't going to learn. It takes this counter force for it to be productive.
Yeah.
You need to be comfortable in the discomfort.
Totally. Well, that is actually such a phenomenal, like, just, I don't know, little, I think it has a great parallel to just life in general. I think an activity like that it probably has a lot of parallels.
Really absolutely. Great avenues for personal growth and also for humility. When 13-year-old kids and like 125-pound women are choking me out, like you get a little bit a healthier relationship with failure.
For sure. Exactly. I can only imagine. Yeah.
Super warm, super welcoming, great community feels, lots of lessons that you can apply more broadly than just jiu-jitsu. Plus it's exercise, self-defense.
Yeah.
It's a great one. I'm a big fan and I'll keep touting the benefits until the whole class wants to go.
And and the Joe Rogan cosign is not a bad thing either, man. I in the podcast I've listened to, I mean, he really he breaks it down. He's like, dude, this is like, we should be getting kids in this. Like, everybody needs to be doing jujitsu, He's like, it's just so good for you. But I mean, honestly, I have no reason not to believe him.
Yeah,
But,
it was definitely an inspiring factor for me to pick it up. And I got to say, I've found a lot of benefits in doing it.
For sure.
As amateur and white belt as I am.
That's okay, man. Everybody starts out as a white belt.
Exactly.
The journey of 1,000 million miles begins with the first step.
Ooh, that's a distance. All right. We're coming up on like a target hour. We do love having repeat guests. And now you've, popped the podcast cherry to get more vulgar at the end. If you've listened this far or to any of the other episodes we have, then maybe that's a little bit less abnormal than the conversation we've tracked so far. But to end on a goofier, lighter-hearted note, I'm going to hit you with some of our favorite Would You Rathers.
Okay, I'm ready.
And if you're a fellow classmate or looking for any more value-added conversation, now's a good time to turn it off. So this one is about as far a pivot from our conversation so far as possible. But since it's been on, I don't know, 20 other episodes, this is the go-to.
Okay, gotcha. I'm ready.
Safe space here. We're ignoring and, acknowledging that we might be idiots and don't mean to offend or be stupid on purpose. Would you rather have no penises or 5 penises?
Oh.
And if 5, where are you going to put them? This is not like a male dominant thing. The question doesn't work as well for people who don't identify as male, but this is also a logistics and sociology question, not just
absolutely
penis.
Man, okay. That's a great question. Well, I mean, if I'm being honest, so I'm weighing the pros and cons. I think that there's definitely, and I'm approaching this question as someone who's been a male, who's identified as a male, for my whole life. And so I have grown to appreciate the utility of my penis.
The pee in anywhere thing is a pretty huge bonus.
So I think I'm going to err on the side of having 5.
As a common answer.
as opposed to none. But the follow-up question is what really gets me. Because I'm like wondering if it's not really logistically.
We've got a couple of clarifying rules that might help.
Okay.
You've got one, we're going to be doctors, so one functional scrotum with reproductive organs in the usual spot. The 5 do not all come with their own.
Okay.
Wherever they end up, you've got the appropriate plumbing for it to be, fully functional.
Okay. All right.
And no surgical removal.
Okay. And so they can all then become erect and all that stuff. Okay. Because I only ask that because, if I'm putting them on a part of my body where they're less exposed, but also like more subject to potential jostling, you could have accidental sort of, you could be pitching tents all over the place. But yeah, I was kind of like, my initial was like, maybe I'll just have like sort of a coral reef situation in my groin, but that would present a few obvious problems. So maybe I'm thinking the first 2 I'm going to attach to my right and left butt cheek.
Ooh, I think butt cheek might be a new one for this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like they'll just kind of be sort of little tails.
Yeah. All right.
I think that like, if you're to take your pants off or whatever, and like you kind of had a few tails back there, like maybe that's not as jarring of an experience. I mean, we're talking relative terms and like,
Yeah, of course.
But so that, okay, so that's my first 2. I got 3 more to work with.
Yes, you do.
One of them though is my just
default
regular
spot.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
So default spot for one of them. So I got 2 left. I'm thinking.
We've had some interesting ones. We've had under the hair. We've had armpit. We've had top
actually,
of the feet.
I was going to say, like, what if I do one, like, on like a little bit high up on my forehead so I can rock the coif and it kind of helps with the structural integrity of the coif?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Less gel needed.
And, in instances where I sort of absentmindedly, accidentally, I'm stroking my hair and it, becomes erect, it's sort of like a unicorn situation. I could potentially, decorate it, such that,
Yeah.
when that does happen, like there is an appreciation of, the beauty,
Yeah. There you go.
and of being kind of a mythical, sort of creature.
You'd certainly go down in myths after this.
Yeah, I would say, okay, so I got one more to work with. I'm thinking, man.
We've heard Spinosaurus style straight down the back.
Sure, okay.
What else?
That's
I think
pretty good.
bandolier, all 5 around the waist.
Dude, well, what if I do belly button?
Okay.
And
Not
then
using
it's
it for anything else.
It's just kind of like an Audi situation. And yeah, I mean, like it's just, I guess it would make shirt wearing a little tougher, I guess. But I mean, if
you like the baggier shirts you were saying anyway.
I do like the baggier shirts. It's like I don't really wear a whole lot of the form fitting because I'll be honest, just like I feel like sometimes the and this is just a side note, the baggier shirts sometimes, like I feel like they make me look, like more filled out, I guess, in a way. And that's, probably a little bit of body dysmorphia there, whatever. But
we roll with it, we accept it.
But I do like the aesthetic. I'll say that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, and I think it would work well with the belly button attachment.
All right. Belly button, standard spot, both butt cheeks, and the unicorn.
Yeah.
That's a solid spread, and I think a unique one.
That's a solid spread.
dozen or 2 people that we've asked this of.
For sure. Well,
and if you need, we can edit this chunk out entirely if you don't want to be associated with this question. We keep a bit of silly here.
If it bites me in the ass and someone, brings me into an office and they play it back to me, I think that whole experience in and of itself would be funny enough
to bring it back to the podcast and relate
to warrant, whatever discipline I receive.
Yeah, we put a couple of disclaimers audibly, and on some of the video ones, I even wrote out a few. Nothing in this podcast is meant to be a definite or firm viewpoint, a judgment on anyone, exclusionary in any way.
Yep.
Anything that is this vein of non-serious talk is just that.
Yeah.
Goofing around, flexing creativity, and being silly for the sake of being silly. We don't mean to hurt anyone. The intention is just maybe a giggle.
Yes.
And
I like that.
In case you change your mind and say, let's cut it out, let me give you 1 or 2 more quickies so we have enough to fill the hour.
Exactly. Okay, let's do it.
All right. So one that recently came up with some contention between me and OG co-host Steve.
Okay.
Would you rather only be able to eat broccoli for every meal for the rest of your life, or have to watch 1 full hour, 60 minutes of Keeping Up with the Kardashians every single day?
Oh, dude, that's an easy one for me.
Let me hear it.
I mean, maybe you won't like the answer, but I'm watching Kardashians for an hour.
I am alone in the broccoli.
I mean, I was just like, dude, I think that reality TV, as vapid as it is, it entertains the hell out of me.
All right. This is a no multitask scenario. Your phone's down. You're watching the show.
For sure. And so be it. And the thing is, I will say, there are social, quandaries that show has created for our society and our culture that is rough, and I totally appreciate that. And the beauty standards, just the kind of bizarre hypocrisy of oh, this is kind of how I naturally look, and denying augmentation, and having that be the sort of normative standard, that's all really harmful. But the show on its face, just pure entertainment value. Just Jersey Shore, just Love Island, whatever. All of it is just it's hilarious and ludicrous and just so interesting to I don't know how it all works, where it's are they being given scenarios and they're like given the agency to act within that scenario, or like how? If
My
it's all
guess
off the
is
cuff?
in the same way that, say outrage culture is fueled by what leads and the algorithms that push forward what people engage with. I'm pretty sure that being bluntly like scumbags and drama queens and whatever
Right.
else is what gets the show ratings, is what
Sure.
gets them that feedback, what gets them the bag. That's
Exactly.
you're gonna lean into it. And if it starts as not your real personality, you're gonna lean into it until it is.
You literally you lean
I
into what's
think it's
profitable.
them. I think for what it's worth, it is their reality.
Yeah. I think I definitely agree with that. I definitely think it's a situation where like they find people, I mean, maybe less in the case of the Kardashians, but like in other ones where like they find people who fit particular archetypes and they're just like, dude, this person is just like such a character.
Yeah.
And like I just want to see what happens when I put all these people together.
And that stance, I think, is more for Kardashians, where the show follows them specifically. I think more on shows like The Bachelor or Love Island, where there's rotating casts. From what I understand, there is a pretty hefty amount of producer input, and not necessarily like these are your lines, you're playing the D-bag, but you get less screen time, you get less visibility. Like you get kind of pigeonholed into the roles that the producers
like
think.
there's obvious incentive.
Yes, exactly.
To being the attitude,
That's what I would guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Makes sense.
And one final one to bring it home. Maybe not an explicit would you rather A versus B, but if it helped you, I could reframe it in a would you rather structure.
Okay.
We don't support in any way, shape, or form animal cruelty or violence on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, with a sword, were out in the wild anywhere in the world, what do you think is the most dangerous animal that you would be able to take in a one-on-one?
With a sword?
Yep, you and a sword.
Okay, and is this like a rapier sword or like a scimitar?
I guess your choice. We've been going like hand and a half, Jon Snow type.
Okay, all right. So
long
like your
sword-
standard knight of the
yes.
round table. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess. Okay.
I don't think I could take a tiger. You get one shot.
Yeah,
and-
exactly. I'm thinking like, dude, this is a one-shot deal. Where like you got to end it first get.
The opposite being like an ostrich, where it's 6 feet of target.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would say the animal that I could probably take would have to be, and this is like any animal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I don't think I'd fare well against an orca.
Yeah, an orca would definitely be tough. I guess in the right conditions, I'm thinking I could take. I think I could take, and I'm not the alpha, but I think I could take a wolf.
I was thinking wolf. That's a solid option.
Yeah, I think like maybe one of the underlings. Like I could do well.
You got some good spacing options with a sword.
Right.
You can most likely, unless they get right to your vitals, you get more than like a single shot at this.
Right.
Liam Neeson did it with broken
I was
mini
about to
bottles.
say, yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna be Liam Neeson in the den. I'm surprised the wolf even gave him the time of day to like put his brass knuckle things on or whatever the hell they were. But
Wolf's a solid option.
yeah.
I think some of the others we've heard are like black bear, probably yes. Brown bear, most likely no.
Yeah, I would say maybe black bear because they're like kind of. I think like they're vegetarians, right? So I just feel like
Omnivores, I think.
okay, all right.
I'm pretty certain they're opportunistic.
If pushed, if backed into a corner,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, they would.
Exactly. Grizzly's a bit much. Polar bear, way too much.
Grizzly, no, yeah, I would.
Big cats are tough. Like a medium-sized lion, maybe, but that's kind of
they're
terrible.
just fast, dude, and like
Leopard, jaguar, decent shot.
Yeah.
Again, protect the neck, but
Right.
maybe.
They're going
I
for
think a
that.
wolf is a pretty good sweet spot for like, we're talking Vygotsky, the zone of proximal development, challenging, but not out of the realm of possibility.
Exactly. Like if I could probably build up to one of the
Could work my way through the Canada goose, get
Right.
past the honey badger, get to the wolf.
Exactly. But yeah, I would say, I haven't even wielded a sword in my life before.
That's a huge factor, right?
yeah.
I've watched. We got mirror neurons, but that ain't the same.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so
All right, wolf. We'll lock that in.
lock it in, man.
All right. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming out here, taking an hour and change out of the busy pre-reading schedule.
Of course, man. This was so much fun. I really hope that I was able to bring some value. It's my first time.
This is
so-
easily in the top maybe 3 of 80 episodes for actual content and value. most of what we cover is not this. And there's
sounds like a fun podcast. Man.
Yeah, one other med student we had on as a guest that might have a run for its money, but no, that was some legitimate conversation, and I appreciate the perspectives and value that you did bring.
Dude, thank you very, very much. And of course, the feeling is mutual.
And thank you everyone for listening to A Couple of Fellas.